Hey guys, tonight we slip into the dust-choked streets of the American Wild West. Not the version with shiny belt buckles and dramatic shootouts every 5 minutes, but the quieter, grittier one with real mud, real mosquitoes, and real danger behind every flutter of a saloon curtain. You're here not as a cowboy, not even as a regular drifter, but as someone quietly slipping in behind the batwing doors to glimpse the life of the women who ran the show. The madams, the ones who didn't just survive the Wild West, they ran it, one velvet couch and bribe at a time. The air smells like warm ale, old wood, and something suspiciously sweet, possibly cinnamon, possibly blood. A piano plinks off-key in the background, while laughter rises over the hum of poker chips and poorly suppressed coughs. A saloon girl flashes you a look that says, "Buy something or keep walking." And in the upstairs shadows, a madam with a ledger and a derringer, calculating both your worth and your threat level. And guess what? You probably wouldn't survive this world for more than 20 minutes. Between the cholera in the water and the bullet in your back, odds are stacked. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward in your dust-covered boots, barely noticing how the warped floorboards shift under you. The saloon ahead looks like every Western movie ever promised, except real life isn't color-graded. It's messier, cruder. The lace curtains are stained from last month's rain. The oil lamps flicker and hiss. One chair leg has been replaced with a whiskey bottle. And you're trying not to trip over a sleeping dog someone apparently gave beer to. This is Deadwood. Or maybe it's Tombstone. Could be Dodge City. Doesn't matter really. Every boomtown is a variation on the same theme. Men chasing gold, women finding ways to survive the chase. And smack in the middle is the saloon, run not by the sheriff, not by the mayor, but by the most dangerous person in town, a woman with ledgers in her lap and a past she won't talk about. Saloons weren't just about drinks and dancing. They were where business happened, where grudges simmered, and where a well-timed flirtation could shift the balance of power. And above all the noise, above all the steam and sweat, sat the madam, watching, calculating, surviving. You don't look at her unless she looks at you first. She knows what she's doing. Knows that the piano player's drunk again and the whiskey's mostly water. Knows which girls might steal from the safe and which lawman is most likely to accept a bribe. You feel eyes on your back as you pass a booth where 2 card players are pretending to not be cheating. That's fine. Let them think you're harmless. The truth is, you're just here to watch. Tonight, your only job is to walk through the sawdust and secrets and see what survival actually looked like when the rules weren't written by anyone sober or kind. Historians still argue whether the average saloon madam was more businesswoman or criminal mastermind. Depends who's writing the book, and whether they've ever had to barter for plumbing in a town with no water. What we do know is this: they were almost never meek. You don't last long in this world being delicate, and you definitely don't keep a saloon profitable just by looking pretty. You hear footsteps creaking above you, heavy boots, probably heading toward one of the rented rooms. You imagine the deal being made, $5, a promise of privacy, and a madam who will absolutely eject you through a window if you mess with her girls. That's another misconception, by the way. Saloon girls weren't just there for the cowboys' amusement. They were income, investment, sometimes even family. You glance to your left and notice the walls. Faded wallpaper. Framed photos of women no one remembers anymore, posed in stiff Victorian dresses next to pistols. One has a baby in her lap. Another has a scar across her chin you don't want to ask about. But there they are, immortalized in sepia, smiling that tight, guarded smile of someone who's seen far too much and is still standing. You hear the sound of dice rattling on a back table. A man curses. A woman laughs, a laugh that could slice glass. You're starting to understand. This isn't a place where you relax. This is a place where you observe, learn, and maybe, if you're smart, get out before nightfall. There's a little-known fact here that's oddly charming. Some madams, in addition to handling accounts and arranging entertainment, also kept herb gardens. That's right. You might have to explain why there's sage and lavender growing out behind a brothel, but hey, people still got headaches and needed poultices. Practical and pretty. Welcome to frontier multitasking. You pause at the bar, where a bored-looking woman wipes a cloudy glass with a rag that might have once been white. She doesn't ask what you want. She just points at a bottle, and you nod. It's probably whiskey. Or turpentine. Either way, it burns. You wince. She smirks. Behind you, a fight's starting. Just voices at first, but you can already tell someone's going to bleed. You casually step aside and let it unfold. No one here flinches. It's just another Tuesday. And upstairs, the madam knows. She always knows. Whether she started as a chambermaid or came west with nothing but a petticoat and a pistol, she's sitting right now with her back to the wall, counting coins, debts, and enemies. She's not a character in a western. She is the western. And you're just getting started. You make your way up the creaky stairs, and with every step, the noise of the saloon below fades into a dull murmur. Piano notes, bending like heat waves, laughter and bickering muffled through the worn wooden planks. Here, things feel closer to private. You press your hand to the wall for balance and realize it's warm. Probably from the stove hidden behind the rooms, or maybe just from the sheer energy these walls have absorbed. The door you stop at isn't fancy. No gold nameplate, just a worn brass knob and a faint perfume of rosewater, tobacco, and paper ink wafting underneath. You knock once, lightly. And then you hear it, a voice that's all business and no patience. Come in, or don't. And so you meet her. She's not what the dime novels promised. No scarlet corset or feather boa. Instead, she's sitting cross-legged in a worn green velvet chair, her boots kicked up on a mismatched trunk. Her hair's pinned back with practical efficiency. Her eyes? They've filed taxes, negotiated with drunk mayors, and buried at least one man who got too handsy. And those eyes are now sizing you up like she's trying to decide if you're trouble, profit, or both. So who were these women, these madams, who operated on the razor-thin line between respectable entrepreneur and criminal outlaw? Some were born dirt poor, daughters of farmers or factory workers who got fed up with hungry winters and abusive fathers. Others were educated and refined. Yes, really, women who lost family fortunes or reputations in the East and fled westward, hoping no one would ask too many questions. And some were former saloon girls who learned fast, watched carefully, and took over when the previous madam either aged out, flamed out, or got caught in the crossfire of someone else's bad decision. You don't become a madam by accident. It's a job that chooses you after you've survived all the other jobs. And once you're in it, you're all in. There's no retirement plan, just bigger risks, smarter lies, and enough silver hidden in the floorboards to make an escape, if needed. Historians still argue whether madams should be remembered as feminist pioneers or as exploiters of the very women they hired. It's a messy, uncomfortable debate. Because the truth is, it was both, and neither. The world of the Wild West didn't operate on clean moral lines, and the madam's world least of all. If you came looking for clean answers, you came to the wrong upstairs office. She leans forward now, offering you a glass of something amber in a real crystal tumbler. You accept, because politeness is cheaper than insults around here. She watches you take a sip. It's surprisingly smooth. Canadian, she says, with a shrug. Cost me a safe full of silver and one idiot with a mule cart. You try not to cough. A lot of madams, at least the successful ones, were expert importers. Booze, furniture, musicians, silk wallpaper shipped all the way from Chicago. One famous madam in Colorado even imported a bathtub carved from Italian marble. Imagine hauling that over the Rockies, just so some drunk miner could soak in it while forgetting his name. That's commitment. And speaking of names, many of these women changed theirs, sometimes more than once. Not just to escape old lives, but to reinvent themselves entirely. You meet one, Miss Lillian V, tonight, and 2 towns over she'll be Madame Genevieve Dumont. And why not? In a world where pasts were dangerous and futures were uncertain, names were costumes, and reinvention was survival. A framed photograph catches your eye. A woman in her early 20s, arms crossed, standing in front of a saloon with a crooked sign and dust curling at her boots. She looks straight into the camera like she knows something you don't. Probably does. That's her. The madam. Younger then. But still her. She catches you looking. That was Cheyenne, she mutters. Before the fire. Before everything. She doesn't explain. You don't ask. You've already learned the first rule. If a madam tells you half the story, it's probably for your own good. There's another little-known tidbit you pick up as she starts shuffling through ledgers and bills. Madams often doubled as unofficial bankers. That's right, when local banks were too shaky, and the sheriff's vault was a joke, folks came to her with their gold dust and IOUs. And she, naturally, charged a modest storage fee. Plus interest. Plus a little favor now and then. You glance around the room again. There are maps on the wall. Supply routes. Rail schedules. A list of names next to symbols you don't recognize. This is not a lady with just one plan. She's playing a game with 7 layers, and you just realized you're standing on one of the boards. She sighs and sets her ledger aside. You think I wanted this job? She says, almost laughing. No girl dreams of counting bruises and beer kegs. But I was good at it, still am, and I get to decide when I stop. She means it, you can tell. You try to imagine her first day, maybe as a scared girl with a suitcase and 5 borrowed dollars, learning to smile just right and walk without tripping on petticoats. But now she's judge, banker, protector, strategist, and if she has to be, executioner. There's something comforting in that, weirdly. In a world where most women had zero power, she's built an empire out of ash and charm. You stand up to go. She doesn't rise. Just nods once and says, "Don't get shot on your way down." You nod back. Out in the hall again, your boots feel heavier. You're not just walking back into the saloon. You're walking into a town where every painted wall, every fake smile, every poker chip thrown has her fingerprint on it. She may not own the town on paper, but make no mistake, she runs it. Back downstairs, the saloon hums with a different kind of energy now that you've seen what's upstairs. Everything feels sharper, more calculated. You catch it in the way the bartender subtly swaps bottles depending on who's ordering, or how one of the girls at the far end of the room flashes a signal you would have missed 10 minutes ago. A touch to the left earring, a nod to the piano player, code for something. A warning? A cue. In the madam's world, nothing happens by accident. So how did these women actually make money? It wasn't all corsets and eyelash batting. The truth is much less glamorous and way more fascinating. Let's talk business. You edged toward a quiet corner, eavesdropping under the guise of sipping a lukewarm drink. A man is haggling over prices, but it's not what you think. He's not negotiating with a saloon girl. He's negotiating with the madam's bookkeeper over how many barrels of whiskey he can store behind the saloon, in exchange for letting the boys use the piano during the weekdays. That's right. Every inch of this place is monetized. The floorboards, the mirrors, the piano keys, rented, leveraged, or loaned out. Because at the heart of the saloon isn't just liquor or lust, it's control. And the madam holds it in her perfectly ink-stained hands. Here's the framework. The saloon runs on 3 streams: alcohol, companionship, and gambling. But that's just the surface. The real money, it's inside deals. Storage, information, favors. The madam rents rooms by the hour upstairs, yes, but she also rents out stable space, launders ill-gotten gold through whiskey shipments, and sells imported perfume that suspiciously smells like home-distilled gin. Mainstream fact? The bordellos in many Wild West towns were often among the best constructed buildings, sometimes even fancier than the town hall. Why? Because madams reinvested. A nicer room meant wealthier clients who stayed longer, drank more, and caused fewer stabbings. Usually, you glance at a wall of flyers. Live music every Friday. Best poker game. This side of Denver, and curiously, fresh eggs and sewing repairs. The last one? A code. The girls who worked here weren't always selling themselves. Sometimes they were actually sewing, or laundering, or making meals for minors too lonely to ask for more. That duality? That was the magic trick. Appear respectable enough to fool the church ladies, be profitable enough to pay off the mayor, and keep the back room locked, just in case. A peculiar tidbit? Some madams made their girls take singing lessons, not for entertainment, but to control their breath and posture. Why? Because confidence sells, and nothing says in charge like a woman who can project her voice over a rowdy room and not flinch. If she could hit a C-sharp and balance a tray of drinks, even better. Historians still argue whether madams truly controlled their own businesses or were, in the end, still beholden to the men who supplied the liquor, paid the bills, or enforced order with a tin star. But again, it depends where you look. Some madams did answer to men. Others buried them in the backyard. Metaphorically, of course. Probably. A commotion near the poker table catches your eye. 2 men slap cards onto the wood, shouting about cheating. One draws back a fist, only to freeze when a voice cuts across the room like a knife through warm butter. It's her, the madam. She's standing at the top of the stairs now, one hand on the railing. No weapons, no raised voice, just presence, and every person in the saloon falls silent like someone turned off the volume. Even the drunk dog looks alert. She nods at one of the girls, who casually walks over to the poker table and takes the deck. "We don't play with marked cards here," the girl says calmly, flipping the deck to reveal a telltale smudge of wax. The accused man starts to protest, but the madam's still watching. And that look? That look ends arguments. He leaves. Quietly. It's one of the oldest tricks in her playbook. Let the girl be the face, but make sure everyone knows who holds the strings. Reputation is everything. And in a world where sheriffs get shot for being too loud, and mayors get replaced every election by a cousin with fewer teeth, the madam is the constant. She's the one you pay, the one you apologize to, and the one you don't ever cross. You overhear a snippet of conversation from a rancher slouched at the bar. She got her liquor license renewed in under an hour. Don't know how. The answer, of course, is not in the paperwork. It's in who owes her a favor. And everyone owes her a favor. You slip behind the bar for a moment, pretending to admire the glassware. A boy, maybe 13, scrubs the floor with a cloth that looks like it's seen too many fights. You ask his name. He shrugs and mutters, "Billy." She lets me sleep in the back. I sweep. Nobody hits me here. And there it is. Another layer. For all the ledger lines and bribes, many madams also ran quiet acts of charity. Took in strays, hid battered women, hired widows who'd otherwise starve. Not out of pure kindness, let's not pretend, but because loyalty and gratitude are long-term investments. And because sometimes survival is just a matter of making enough people feel like they owe you their life. A drunk stumbles through the doors, shirt unbuttoned, holding a chicken. No one blinks. The bartender gives you a tired smile and says, "He'll try to trade that bird for a whiskey. Don't let him." You almost laugh. And that's the thing. Beneath the danger, the grime, and the constant tension, there's something oddly human about it all. The saloon isn't just a place of vice. It's a rotating cast of characters trying to stay alive in a world with no safety nets, where one bad night could mean starvation or worse. And for many, the madam is the only thread holding the chaos together. You hear the clink of coins. A deal's being made. Upstairs, a girl hums softly through a closed door. And somewhere behind the bar, a locked cabinet holds more than just liquor. It holds ledgers, secrets, and maybe a pistol or two. You adjust your coat. You're starting to understand the rhythm now. The way the money moves. The way people move. The way the madam keeps it all stitched together with charm, fear, and an uncanny understanding of human weakness. And you haven't even seen the garden out back. The back door creaks louder than it should as you step out into the night air behind the saloon. A full moon hangs low, bleeding silver across a worn dirt path that snakes behind the building. You half expect to find barrels of whiskey or discarded cards, but instead, you're greeted by an unexpected sight. Rose bushes. Real ones. Even a half-dead tomato plant. And there, in the corner by the fence, a patch of mint and lavender swaying in the breeze. This is the madam's private garden. And now you're learning, survival isn't just about fists and firepower. Sometimes, it's about knowing how to make your own poultices when the doctor's drunk or dead, or having fresh mint on hand when someone important comes by, and you want the air to smell like civilization, at least for 5 minutes. You crouch down, rubbing a leaf between your fingers. The scent is sharp, clean, calming. Maybe that's the point. Out here, in the deadliest, dustiest corners of the West, the madam has carved out something soft. Something alive. Something that tells the girls upstairs, "You're not just cattle. You're not just coin." Whether she believes that or not, well, historians still argue. There's a rustle behind you. A girl, maybe 19, slips out the back door, barefoot, carrying a cracked teacup. She doesn't look surprised to see you. Just nods and starts picking leaves, humming a tune that's half lullaby, half dirge. You recognize the tune. Same one the piano player was fumbling earlier. Turns out she taught it to him. This is the saloon's heartbeat. Not the whiskey or the gambling. Not even the velvet curtains. It's the women. And the madam knows it. You head back inside, ducking through a side hallway this time. On the wall is a series of framed notes, receipts, letters, even a sketch or two. One is from a Judge Alden, thanking the madam for the discreet hospitality and the fine stew. Another is a barely legible scrawl that just says, "Tell your girl I made it to Kansas. Keep the rest." Each one tells a story. Each one proves a point. The madam isn't just a manager. She's a hub. She stores secrets the way bankers store gold. And the more secrets she has, the safer she becomes. You watch her from across the room as she negotiates with a man in a sweat-stained suit who looks like he hasn't bathed since Nevada. He's pleading. She's unmoved. He gestures wildly toward the ceiling. You assume he wants credit for one of the rooms. She says nothing, just raises an eyebrow. He folds faster than a cheap deck of cards. And that's how she wins. Not with threats, with silence, with stillness, with power coiled so tightly you forget it's even there until it snaps. Mainstream fact. Many madams were among the wealthiest people in their towns. Some owned multiple properties, saloon, boarding house, and even the bank building itself. Others controlled entire networks of women and businesses across multiple cities, moving talent like cattle barons moved beef. And still, society pretended they didn't exist. In public, their names were whispered or erased entirely. They weren't invited to church. They weren't spoken of in polite conversation. But if your son went missing in a snowstorm, you went to the madam. If your husband gambled away your mortgage, you went to the madam. And if your cousin needed a job and had nowhere else to go, yep, you went to the madam. Here's a weird little tidbit. Some madams operated under fake marriage licenses. They'd claim to be Mrs. So-and-so, even if the Mr. had vanished into the mountains 10 years ago. Why? Because it gave them legal cover to own land, file contracts, and dodge questions. And sometimes, that non-existent husband was blamed for everything. Oh, that liquor shipment? My husband handled it. Shame he's off hunting elk again. Historians still argue whether these women genuinely saw themselves as moral figures or just shrewd survivors playing a rigged game. But ask anyone who owed them rent, and you'd get a shrug followed by, "She's fair. Don't cheat her." A girl stumbles past you, tears streaking her face, one stocking torn. You flinch, but before you can move, the madam is there. She puts an arm around the girl and leads her to a back room. No theatrics, no yelling, just swift, practiced comfort. And you wonder, how many times has she done that? Dozens? Hundreds? How many girls showed up here thinking it'd be different, only to realize survival is a full-time job, and the madam is both their boss and their last line of defense? You glance up toward the staircase again. A shadow moves, someone leaving quietly. Another night, another secret. Back near the bar, a new performer sets up. She's nervous. You can see it in her hands. The madam steps over, whispers something, and the girl's spine straightens like a rifle being loaded. Support, strategy, stagecraft. You sit down at an empty table, letting the sounds of the saloon wash over you. Boots against wood, coins on felt, laughter edged with warning. The madam walks the room like a conductor, adjusting tempo, quieting instruments, lifting a brow when the rhythm stutters. You close your eyes for a second, just to feel it. The weight of the building, the currents of money, power, affection, and desperation flowing in loops all around you. In this world, being a madam isn't about being popular or pretty. It's about reading people fast and reading them right. It's about knowing when to laugh and when to throw someone out a second-story window. It's about planting lavender in the back so the girls can sleep at night and keeping a shotgun near the stove just in case they don't. And through it all, she survives. Because that's the real secret. She doesn't run a brothel. She runs a kingdom. You wake the next morning, if you slept at all, with your boots still on, your throat dry, and a vague sense that you now owe someone a favor, even if you're not sure why. The saloon, in daylight, looks like a tired stage set after the actors have left. The air hangs heavier. No piano, no laughter. Just chairs stacked, spittoons emptied, and the smell of stale tobacco mingling with yesterday's spilled beer. But upstairs? The madam is already working. You hear her voice through a cracked door, sharp, clipped, organizing deliveries, confirming appointments, reminding a girl to see the doctor. The job never ends. And now it's time to talk about what really kept this operation afloat: care. Not in the sentimental sense, but the brutal logistics of keeping people alive. Because in the Wild West, everything tried to kill you. Cold nights, shady whiskey, bad pork, jealous clients, and the occasional piano wire repurposed into something far more sinister. The madam had to plan for all of it. Let's start with the basics: food. You think saloons lived on whiskey and beans? Please. A smart madam had a cook, sometimes an old woman, sometimes a retired girl who knew how to stretch 2 chickens and a cabbage into something warm. Meals were part of the deal. A girl too hungry is a girl too sick to work. So yes, madams fed their employees. Sometimes better than the local sheriff got fed. And health. That's where it gets complicated. With doctors, unreliable, and medicine borderline mythological, madams often played nurse. They brewed teas, cleaned wounds, kept jars of goose grease and camphor in their nightstands, and enforced rest days, whether the girls liked it or not. Mainstream fact: syphilis and tuberculosis were rampant in the West, and madams who ignored that reality quickly lost their entire workforce. So, many required weekly checkups, often from shady traveling doctors who carried more whiskey than medical degrees, but hey, it was something. And then there were the razors, hidden in boots, sewn into garter belts, stashed in corsets like tiny insurance policies. These weren't for shaving. These were for surviving, because sometimes, no matter how many rules a madam laid down, a client crossed the line. And when he did, there's a story you overhear this morning as you lean near the stairwell. A girl, barely 20, is telling a new arrival how she once broke a whiskey bottle over a man's head because he wouldn't pay. The madam not only didn't fire her, she bought her a new dress. Why? Because you protect your own. And because blood-stained skirts don't look good on recruitment posters. A quirky tidbit? Some madams had safe words, literal code words, like cranberry or chicken soup, that girls could shout if something went wrong during a session. One madam even rigged a bell system under the floorboards. 3 stomps meant, "Come now with the bat." Historians still argue whether this level of protection was standard or rare, depending on the town and the madam. But one thing's for sure: the ones who survived long enough to matter made safety a business asset. Dead girls don't pay rent, and traumatized ones don't attract wealthy clients. You pass through the main floor, now half lit by sunlight sneaking through greasy windows. A woman in a faded blue dress mops the corner. Her movements are slow, but practiced. She hums under her breath, something soft and old. You realize she's probably been here longer than most, maybe even longer than the madam. Maybe she was the madam once. Because that's another unspoken truth. Madams aged out. Fast. The job chewed through them, no matter how clever they were. Between late nights, constant stress, managing debts, fending off drunks, and pretending to care about every single patron's opinion on horse breeding or railroad expansions, it was exhausting. Most madams didn't die in beds surrounded by riches. They disappeared, moved towns, faded into anonymity. But while they reigned, they were queens. Back in the upstairs hallway, a door opens, and you glimpse the madam again. She's balancing a tray of biscuits and honey tea, not for a client, for one of her girls still recovering from the flu. And you realize this isn't a brothel. It's a hospital, a fortress, a halfway house, and a university all rolled into one. Girls came here knowing the risks, but many left stronger, wiser, and occasionally richer. You sit in a side room later, sipping something warm. One of the girls joins you. She's not what you'd expect. Freckles, loose braid, eyes that dart like she's already planning her next town. She tells you how the madam taught her to read contracts, how to spot a forged coin, how to count poker chips by ear. You ask what she'll do next. "Open my own place," she says, grinning. "Smaller, nicer, less blood maybe." You believe her, because the madam's greatest survival trick? She didn't hoard power. She taught it. Not always kindly, not always safely, but she passed it down like a secret recipe, measured in bruises, balanced with rules, and served with a spoonful of sugar for guests who didn't know better. You lean back, letting that settle. Downstairs, a piano key gets tested. A laugh echoes, and behind the curtain, someone's sewing a ripped hem. The saloon is waking again, and the madam, she never stopped. You drift through the saloon just before sundown, when everything starts to shimmer a little golden and dangerous. The dust outside glows like powdered fire, and the gas lamps flicker to life one by one, casting their wobbly halos against the walls. Soon, this place will be roaring again, boots stomping, glasses clinking, voices rising. But right now, it's the calm before the very dramatic storm. You follow the scent of pipe smoke and furniture polish through a narrow hallway you haven't noticed before. It opens into the most surprising room yet, the parlor. And this parlor isn't some dusty afterthought. No, no. It's velvet curtains, polished floors, oil paintings that may or may not be original, and a chandelier that looks like it was stolen from a steamboat ballroom. You blink. For a second, it almost feels civilized. Until you realize what's not here. No men. Just girls, lounging in what passes for peace. One's reading a letter aloud, another is darning a stocking, and a third is practicing a curtsy so theatrical it earns a chorus of groans. Then she walks in, the madam. No announcement, no fanfare. She just steps into the room like gravity's decided to pay attention. Instantly, the laughter quiets, not from fear but respect. The kind of silence that says, she's saved every single one of us at least once. She glances around, scans the faces and nods. Then, get this, she compliments the flowers on the table. You remembered to swap the water this time. It doesn't smell like dead frogs. Well done. Laughter bubbles up again. Just like that, she's reset the tone. Because here's the thing most people don't understand about madams. They didn't just keep the saloon running, they managed the ecosystem of the house. Every girl had her own temperament, her own trauma, her own goals, and the madam, she had to juggle them all. And not just emotionally, practically. Girls needed clean dresses, regular meals, and a steady rotation at the bar to keep tips flowing. They had quotas, schedules, downtime. Yes, there were rotas in some brothels, written in actual ledgers. You laugh now, but imagine trying to organize a workforce where half your employees are chronically underslept, and the other half might be drunk by 4 p.m. Mainstream fact. Many madams created strict house rules. No stealing from clients, no getting involved in fights, no working while sick. Some even banned cursing in the common areas. Because when you're selling fantasy, the illusion has to hold at least until the stairs creak. One fringe tidbit you learn from a girl with more rouge than restraint. Some madams were known to enforce fines for drama. Public crying, hair pulling, jealousy outbursts, all docked from weekly pay. It wasn't cruelty. It was brand management. Because if a client smells chaos, he walks. Or worse, he tells the sheriff. You overhear a story about one such disaster. The girl got jealous, threw a bottle at another's head. Blood everywhere. Client ran screaming. The madam? Calm as a cactus. She paid the doctor herself, sent the bottle thrower packing, and personally rewrote that night's story for anyone who asked. Drunken poker accident, she said. Fools dropped a glass, and it bounced. Historians still argue whether madams truly believed in maintaining order for the girls' sake or the business's, but in practice, it was often the same thing. And gossip? Gossip was weaponized. Every whisper in this parlor had weight. Who slept with who? Who's drinking too much? Which client suddenly had money he shouldn't? And the madam stored it all. Not because she enjoyed the drama, well, maybe a little, but because it gave her leverage. You see it in action later. A merchant arrives, red-faced and furious. Apparently someone from the house borrowed something valuable. The madam listens, offers him a drink, then calmly mentions that his wife plays cards at the church fundraiser with one of her girls, who happens to know about a certain late-night inventory visit. Silence. Apology. He leaves with nothing but embarrassment and a reminder that this house is not to be trifled with. And that's how the madam survives, not with bullets, but with secrets. She doesn't shoot her enemies, she seats them next to each other and lets nature do the rest. You peek into another side room later. A kind of wardrobe mixed with a prop shop. Dresses in every color. Feather fans, stockings, wigs, even hats labeled by town. Cheyenne style, one reads. Another says tombstone flair. It's a costume department, because every girl played a role. Innocent, sultry, exotic, refined, whatever the night required. The madam? She cast them all. Like a director. And if one girl couldn't play Sweet Southern Belle that night, someone else would step in. The show always went on. You remember that girl practicing her curtsy earlier? She's now in full costume, cheeks blushed, ready for a client who only likes French accents. She doesn't speak a word of French, but she's got a wig and enough nerve to fake it. The madam watches from the hallway, arms folded. She doesn't correct her pronunciation. She knows it doesn't matter. What matters is that the illusion holds. Downstairs, the saloon begins to fill again. Boots stomping. Voices rising. And the air? It's thick with perfume, sweat, and something electric. Possibility, or maybe danger. The girls head down one by one, transformed. Not girls anymore, characters. And behind them, the madam follows. Not because she needs to, because this is her theater. And tonight's show? Flawless. Downstairs again, and the saloon is back to full roar. The piano player's fingers blur across the keys, more enthusiastic than accurate, and the crowd eats it up. Miners bellow over their drinks, gamblers flash teeth and fake hands, and someone's already broken a chair. You barely catch your breath before the next moment swallows it. But you're not here for the chaos. You're watching the madam. She moves through the room like wind through wheat, quiet, smooth, but impossible to ignore. One nod to the bartender. One glance at the girl too drunk to be working tonight. One discreet slip of coins to the boy by the door. She's not checking things, she's controlling them. Tonight, she'll be doing something most people never credit her for, handling the law. Because for all the talk of sheriffs and marshals, frontier justice was more about politics and coin than it was about truth or peace. And no one knew that better than the madam. You notice a man at the bar. Tin star pinned crookedly to his shirt, eyes scanning the crowd with the lethargy of someone who's seen too much and been bribed even more. That's the town marshal. Theoretically, he's here to enforce order. Realistically, he's here for free drinks and a cut of the profits. And the madam knows it. You sidle close enough to overhear them at the bar. She slides him a cigar. Not fancy. just familiar. Their voices stay low, but the message is clear. Business is good, no one's bleeding, and that envelope in her boot is exactly where it should be. Mainstream fact? In many frontier towns, madams paid regular fines to stay in business. The amounts were often written into city ledgers under euphemisms like public nuisance mitigation or license upkeep, but everyone knew the truth. It was a protection racket dressed in paperwork. Quirky fringe tidbit: some madams ran for office themselves, under assumed names, of course. One even got elected to a school board, promising to donate part of her boarding house profits to textbooks. She won by a landslide. The mayor blushed through the entire swearing-in ceremony. Historians still argue whether these arrangements kept towns stable or just allowed corruption to thrive under a lace veil. But in practice, it worked. Everyone got a slice. Everyone kept smiling. And the madam? She stayed open another night. You turn to the window and watch a group of church ladies march past in tight formation, faces pinched with judgment. Their skirts rustle like angry parchment. You expect the madam to flinch, or at least pretend to hide. She doesn't. Instead, she waves. Not mockingly, not smugly. Just waves. One of the women hesitates, almost waves back. You catch a sliver of truth in that moment. The churchgoers and the saloon girls lived in the same town, shopped at the same stores, shared the same dusty road. And as much as they clutched pearls and quoted scripture, they knew where to go when their sons got arrested or their husbands disappeared. They needed her, even if they never said her name. A little later, the judge arrives. You recognize him from the note on the madam's wall upstairs. His beard is less neat tonight, and his smile is exactly as oily as you feared. He heads straight for her table. She doesn't stand, doesn't shift, just offers him a chair. He accepts. They talk in low tones, no flirting, no theatrics, just negotiation. You gather that he's been hearing concerns about the house, not from the law, but from someone wealthier, a merchant maybe, or a new preacher with fancy ideas about decency. The madam listens. Then she reminds him, gently, that she has records, receipts, letters, witnesses, nothing illegal, just memorable. He goes quiet, sips his drink. She smiles. That's power. Not just having secrets, but knowing when not to use them, and making sure people know you know. Later that night, you slip into a side room that acts as her unofficial office. It's stacked with ledgers, maps, and, most surprisingly, school books. Spelling primers, arithmetic guides. You flip one open and find a note in a girl's handwriting. Miss L taught me how to write my name today. She says knowing numbers will make me dangerous. You smile. This isn't just a business. It's a boot camp, a sanctuary, an unlicensed university of grit. And the law? The real law? It's being written in here. Every time the madam smooths over a bar brawl, or pays the jailer to lose a charge sheet, or helps a girl buy passage east to escape a client with too many teeth. You leave the room and find her near the fireplace, staring into the flames with a tired kind of serenity. Ever think about leaving? You ask before you can stop yourself. She doesn't look at you, just lifts one shoulder. Sometimes. Then I remember, if I go, who teaches the next one? You nod. And just like that, someone screams from upstairs. The madam sighs, downs the rest of her drink, and strides toward the sound. No panic, no rush. Just another night. Just another fire to put out. Just another law to rewrite. The scream from upstairs fades into background noise as quickly as it flared up. That's how it goes in this place. Intensity burns fast, then disappears like smoke through the rafters. You don't even make it halfway up the stairs before it's handled. The madam has already smoothed the situation like a wrinkle in satin. You learn fast. Most of her crises never see daylight. That's what brings you to tonight's focus: how madams manage to keep their doors open under relentless scrutiny, suspicion, and sudden raids. Spoiler, it wasn't magic. It was paperwork, performance, and a whole lot of plausible deniability. Let's talk camouflage. You duck into the hallway off the kitchen, where a crooked sign on a door reads, "Laundry, staff only." You push it open and find exactly what you expect: a washboard, a tub, a pile of clothes, and an entire fake business. You're standing inside one of the oldest tricks in the book, a legitimate front. See, the smartest madams didn't advertise their saloons or brothels with flashing signs or garish red lanterns. Well, sometimes a red lantern. But tastefully. They ran boarding houses, seamstress shops, or in this case, a commercial laundry. All above board, clean as boiled linen. And if a sheriff came sniffing, she could point to the soap and shrug. Mainstream historical fact: many madams operated dual businesses. The saloon up front, the tailor shop down below. Girls who entertained at night were often seen mending shirts by day. And yes, some madams filed real tax returns under those professions. A few even won small business awards from their local chambers of commerce. Let that sink in. Fringe tidbit? In one Texas town, a madam reportedly ran a school for foreign languages, except every girl only tutored in one-on-one sessions, behind closed doors, and none of them spoke anything but English. Creative? Extremely. Effective? You bet. Historians still argue whether these business fronts fooled anyone or if the community just collectively chose to look away. The truth probably lives somewhere in between, where morality was flexible, but respectability still needed dressing up. You wander back through the kitchen and see a woman, older, maybe the cook, spooning beef stew into bowls with military precision. You thank her. She shrugs like that's the least interesting part of her day. In the next room over, one of the girls is setting up a small table with wine and candles. She's humming. Nothing suspicious about it, until she double-checks the position of the chairs and nudges a hidden latch under the window. A second exit. Always have one. That's rule number 2 in the madam's playbook. If a raid hits, and sometimes they did, you needed a way out. Fast. You recall a story you overheard earlier. A rival house across town was shut down last winter when a new sheriff accidentally walked in during a card game that didn't stay legal. The girls barely made it out in time, except the madam. She had a rope ladder tied behind the curtains and was halfway down the alley before the first chair broke. You take a peek behind this house's curtains. Sure enough. Rope ladder. Coiled neatly. Smells like fresh oil. There's something elegant about the way these women planned. Not with brute force or paranoia, but with careful, practiced logistics. Every door checked. Every false wall mapped. One madam even kept a decoy diary full of fictional confessions that made her look like the helpless puppet of a male client. If things ever got ugly, she planned to hand it over. Blame him. Walk away. The madam here? She doesn't keep a decoy diary. She keeps the real one. And she stores it in a hollowed-out Bible on her bookshelf. You saw it yesterday when she asked you to pass her the book of Job, then gave you a wink. A metaphor? Maybe? You pass by her office again and catch her going over receipts. Whiskey barrels, lace trim, firewood, and something labeled simply Butter Fund. You raise an eyebrow. She notices. Some things are better with butter, she says. Even bribes. And there it is. The third pillar of staying open, relationships. Not just with lawmen, but with suppliers, neighbors, and even reporters. Keep everyone slightly fed, slightly amused, and slightly indebted to you. That's how the madam moves unnoticed. How she's open every night while others shutter their windows. You think back to last week's newcomer, the wide-eyed girl who couldn't sew, couldn't flirt, and couldn't stop crying. Most places would have turned her away, but the madam let her stay, had her sorting linens, making tea, keeping quiet. Why? Because having a quiet girl in the corner is less suspicious than having a locked room, because sometimes a chess piece looks like a pawn until it moves. Later that night, you find yourself near the entrance when a man in a stiff hat and city shoes walks in. You can spot a bureaucrat by his discomfort. He blinks at the room, adjusts his collar, and finds the madam in less than 5 seconds. She greets him like a cousin. They chat, sip wine. He doesn't stay long. When he leaves, he's holding a box of seamstress samples and looking very relieved. You don't need to ask. He just got what he came for, whatever that may be, and she's now got one more paper trail in her favor. Another whisper in the right ear. Another week of peace. And you start to realize survival for madams wasn't about hiding in shadows. It was about blending into the light. About looking respectable enough to be ignored, helpful enough to be protected, and dangerous enough to be left alone. You walk back through the saloon as the night hits full swing. Laughter, cards, and the clatter of coins echo against the walls, but beneath the noise, the real operation hums on. Smooth, invisible, untouchable, just the way the madam planned it. You've been here long enough now to understand the rhythm of this place, the daily pulse that starts in silence, builds through tension, and bursts into noise, heat, and coin clatter by nightfall. But tonight, there's a different energy in the air. A girl has vanished. No one says it out loud at first. They just notice a dress left out, a hairbrush untouched, an empty plate still sitting cold on a side table. You feel the shift ripple quietly, whispers behind hands, eyes darting toward the staircase. Then, the madam emerges. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't frown. She simply says, "Tell me who saw her last." And just like that, you're watching her transition from hostess to general. Because tonight isn't just about survival. It's about protection. And not from customers or diseases, but from other madams. Yes, rivalry was a thing, and not the polite competition kind either. We're talking full-scale turf wars, seductions, sabotage, and the occasional mysterious fire. Think of it less like Real Housewives, more like Game of Thrones, but with better hats and significantly more eyeliner. Tonight, you find yourself entangled in one of those rivalries. The missing girl? A favorite of the madam, clever with cards, excellent at charm, and, rumor has it, being poached by the red-haired woman who runs the refined parlor across the tracks. The madam moves quickly. She sends 2 of her girls out, not to retrieve the runaway, but to gather information. This isn't about dragging anyone back. It's about knowing where the pieces are before someone tips the board. Mainstream fact. Rival madams often tried to steal each other's workers by offering better pay, softer beds, or promises of safety. And it wasn't illegal. Women could leave whenever they wanted. But that didn't mean it wasn't personal. Fringe tidbit? Some madams trained their girls in small cons, not to rob clients, but to fend off rivals. Ever heard of false talent scouting? One madam would send a girl pretending to be from the Chicago Opera House, offering contracts that mysteriously never existed, and by the time the competition figured it out, they'd lost 2 top earners and half their furniture. Historians still argue whether these rivalries were based more on business or ego. But when the livelihoods of dozens of women depended on a single building staying full and functional, both probably applied. The madam doesn't rant, doesn't curse. She just moves with a kind of low, coiled anger, like a snake deciding whether or not to strike. She lights a cigarette, sits back in her velvet chair, and calls for her ledger. "Let her go," she says finally, more to herself than anyone else. "Let her think she got out clean." You think it's over. It's not. Within an hour, one of her girls returns, not with the missing girl, but with a dress. One that was worn just the night before. It's been torn deliberately at the hem. Message received. The madam doesn't flinch. She sends back a bottle of the rival's favorite brandy. Not poisoned, not tampered with, just a gift. And beneath the label, a folded note that says, "I hope she's worth it. You'll find out she's not." You feel the weight of it. No shouting, no show, just leverage. And here's where the real mastery of being a madam comes into play. Not brute force, but psychological chess. She doesn't fight over workers. She lets her rivals hang themselves with rope she politely handed them. Later, she walks the floor like nothing happened. The girls joke again. The piano stumbles along. But every woman in the room knows what just happened. And they're grateful. Because the madam just proved she'll let you leave, but she'll never let someone else steal you. That loyalty, it's earned, not bought. You wander into the hallway again and overhear a conversation between two of the newer girls. One of them, clearly shaken by the drama, asks why they don't just leave town and start their own places. The other laughs. "You think I can afford that? A building? Supplies? Bribes? I didn't even own my last pair of shoes." You realize the truth. For many of these women, the madam isn't just a boss, she's infrastructure. A firewall. The one who makes the rest of the world keep its claws off them for just long enough to breathe. And sure, there are rules. There are fines. There are quotas. But there's also protection. You glance again at the rope ladder behind the curtain. You remember the back garden with the mint and lavender. You remember the safe word, cranberry, if you forgot. And you remember the note tucked in the hollow Bible upstairs. This is a fortress disguised as a flirt. And the madam, she's not at war with the world. She is the war. Later that night, when things finally settle, you find her sitting alone, watching the empty floor like it's a battlefield she just walked off. "You lose many?" you ask gently. She snorts. "All of them, eventually," she says. But not without teaching them something. She ashes her cigarette, stands, and smooths her skirt. Let her go. She'll be back when her feet get cold. You believe her, because she always knows where the exits are. And more importantly, she knows what's waiting at the end of them. No horses, but plenty of crates, stacked high and labeled things like winter linens, spare fixtures, and your favorite. Do not open unless someone's bleeding. There's a system here, a logic, and above it all is the escape bag. You spot it by accident, tucked behind a beam, barely visible under a tarp. You nudge it with your foot. It's heavier than it looks. Inside, you suspect, are clothes, ledgers, cash, and maybe the names of people who really don't want to be exposed. The madam doesn't carry keys on a ring. She carries them in her mind, and this bag is the lockbox of her legacy. The girls don't ask about it. They know it's there, and they know what it means. She's told them before. If you ever wake up and I'm gone, take what's left and sell the furniture. But burn the letters. Always burn the letters. That night, the saloon fills again. The world keeps turning, but you watch her a little differently now. Every time she scans the room, you realize she's not looking at the guests, she's measuring exits. She knows how long it takes to run to the stables, how long the ladder holds, who might help her, who might betray her, And most importantly, she knows when it's time to go. Because madams never live in the moment. They live 3 steps ahead. Later, you help her move a crate. It's heavier than expected. She doesn't grunt or curse, just smiles faintly and says, "You'd be amazed how much silver you can fit under a false floorboard." You believe her. She looks around the room one last time, straightens a lamp, tucks a curtain back into place. "This place could burn tomorrow," she says, almost dreamily. "And I'd be in Kansas before the ashes cooled." She isn't bragging, she's reminding herself. And maybe you too, because survival isn't just staying upright. It's knowing when to disappear and how to reappear somewhere else, still wearing boots and holding the reins. Morning again, though it hardly feels like the days ever really end around here. The air outside is already warm, dust curling off the road like it has a mind of its own. But inside, the saloon is quieter than it's been in days. The chairs are all straightened, lamps cleaned, the girls are still asleep, or pretending to be. The madam is in her office, writing a letter you'll never see, in a hand so neat it looks like printed type. You're starting to think she never really rests. Today, she's preparing for something you haven't seen yet. Something every madam has in the back of her mind from the minute she opens shop: escape. Because for all the velvet and laughter, this life is always one bad night away from being over. One preacher with a grudge, one client with connections, one jealous rival with a bucket of kerosene, and it all burns down. Literally, in many cases. So every madam had a plan, an exit, a decoy, a way to disappear. You head upstairs, guided more by instinct than anything else, and find the room she never shows to guests. The wallpaper is peeling. The furniture is plain. There's a suitcase in the corner, half packed, half forgotten. A hat box. A rusted revolver wrapped in a scarf, and in a box on the dresser. Enough silver coins to start a new life in a new town. Maybe in a new name. You don't touch anything. Because this isn't decoration. This is survival, boxed up and waiting. Mainstream fact. Many madams change towns frequently, sometimes because of new laws, sometimes because of new laws, sometimes because they simply outlived their welcome. A madam who stayed too long risked losing her edge, and once your edge dulls, well, you become a target. Fringe tidbit? One famous madam buried gold coins in pickle jars across 3 counties. She used a hand-drawn map and swore only her best girl knew the full route. No one knows if the jars were ever found, but there's a local legend about a pig farmer who accidentally dug one up and never told his wife. Historians still argue whether madams lived in constant fear or calculated readiness. But here, in this quiet room, you can feel the truth. It wasn't fear. It was insurance. She's not waiting for disaster. She's just prepared to walk out the back door if it comes. You remember the night you saw her argue with the merchant? She didn't raise her voice then either. She just looked at him like she already knew where she'd go if he pushed too far. And now you see it for what it is. She's always ready to leave the game without flinching. That afternoon, she gives the girls an unscheduled break. They scatter, some to nap, others to town. You stay behind, drawn to the corner of the saloon where she's unpacking a crate. Inside, curtains, costume jewelry, hair brushes, and, of all things, a small hand mirror with initials carved into the handle. Not hers. "Things I left behind last time," she says without looking up. "Found someone heading through El Paso who owed me a favor." She pauses, holds up the mirror, then tosses it gently onto a nearby table. "You should always be able to walk away from everything you own," she says. "Just never forget where you buried the good stuff." You want to ask what she means, but she's already moved on. You head out back later and find the old stable has been repurposed. The next morning brings something different, something even the madam can't fully plan for. A knock at the front door. Slow, heavy, rhythmic in that official kind of way that makes everyone in the saloon instinctively sit up straighter and stop whatever totally legal activity they were engaged in. You're by the staircase when the madam opens the door. Missionaries. 3 of them. 2 men with close-cropped hair and travel-worn shoes, and 1 woman holding a Bible so tightly you worry she's trying to strangle it. Their faces are tight with conviction, and their eyes skim the room like they're scanning for lost souls to retrieve before the devil himself throws another poker night. "Good morning," one of the men says with a polite nod, already shifting his weight like he doesn't plan to be invited in, but very much plans to talk anyway. "We're visiting local establishments to offer moral redirection." "Ah, that." You take a step back and prepare for the most passive-aggressive showdown in frontier history. But the madam, she smiles. Not the sharp kind she uses on sheriffs or the amused kind she uses on drunk miners. This one's soft, smooth, practically saintly. "Of course," she says. "Come in. You must be thirsty. And now you are the one holding your breath. Because this is a new performance." The saloon suddenly morphs. One of the girls appears, coincidentally you're sure, in a high-collared dress with not a hint of rouge. She offers tea. Real tea, too, not the kind that smells suspiciously of brandy. Another girl tidies up the piano sheet music to include only church hymns. And somewhere, you're not even sure when, someone has found a Bible and placed it gently beside a candle. Mainstream fact? Madams often maintained a second identity, a respectable persona for interacting with churches, charities, or ladies' reform societies. It was essential PR. A few even donated regularly to local churches, partially out of guilt, mostly out of strategy. Fringe tidbit? One madam allegedly hosted Bible study once a week, strictly women only, and read scripture in between collecting rent. Some historians argue whether she believed a word of it. Others say she cried every time they got to the prodigal son. The missionaries are seated, steaming cups in hand, visibly confused, but unwilling to break hospitality protocol. The lead preacher opens his Bible and launches into a well-practiced monologue about sin, salvation. She even hums agreement once or twice. She doesn't argue. She doesn't defend. She just listens like he's explaining weather patterns. Then, when he pauses for effect, she tilts her head and says, "Would you like to see our sewing room?" He blinks. You almost laugh. But no one moves. She stands and gestures gently. And like curious sheep, the missionaries follow her toward the back, into the room you know is mostly used for costume repairs, tea breaks, and hiding whiskey during raids. You trail behind. Inside, the sewing room has been transformed. Neat baskets of fabric, spools of thread, a half-finished quilt on the table. There's even a vase of wildflowers, freshly picked. A younger girl sits nearby, head bowed, working on a hemline like her life depends on it. And honestly, maybe it does. "This is where we train our girls in practical skills," the madam says warmly. "Not everyone works the bar. Some prefer quieter trades. We believe in giving them options." The missionary woman frowns. It's a confused frown, not an angry one. You can almost see the gears turning. She came here expecting sinners. Instead, she got tea, civility, and a woman who sounds like a boarding school matron. That tension between assumption and reality is exactly what the madam plays like a violin. Because she knows you don't fight sanctimony with rebellion, you fight it with hospitality. She thanks them graciously when they leave. Offers a donation envelope. says she hopes they'll come back for supper. Then she closes the door, waits until the dust settles on their boots outside, and finally exhales. "That should buy us 6 weeks," she mutters, heading toward her office. You follow, still stunned by the pageantry. And then you see it, the ledger. She flips it open, not to check profits, but to record the visit. Date, time, names, observations, even which Bible verse the preacher quoted. Because it's not just about fooling the church, it's about tracking the pattern. Some madams even had church visit schedules pinned inside closets. If the Baptists came 1 week, expect the Methodists next. A madam prepared for religious scrutiny the way others prepared for tax season. Historians still argue whether these performances were survival strategies or subtle acts of defiance. But either way, they worked. The saloon stays open, the girls stay safe, and the missionaries leave feeling like maybe, just maybe, they made a difference. But you know the truth. So do the girls, and so does the madam. That night, the saloon returns to its usual noise. The velvet curtains are back, the piano's tuned for ragtime instead of hymns, and the girl who played the quiet seamstress now dances in a crimson dress with a feathered fan. The candle beside the Bible is gone. And in the back room, a jar marked Missionaries Fund now holds exactly 4 coins and 1 crumpled pamphlet titled "Purity Begins at Home." The madam walks by and sees you smiling at it. She doesn't smile back, just says, "Next time they bring pie." If you stick around long enough in the Wild West, you learn that disaster doesn't always knock. Sometimes it kicks the door in, orders a drink, and burns the place down while you're still figuring out who it owes money to. And tonight, it kicks hard. You wake to smoke. Real smoke, not from cigars or kitchen fires, but something bigger. The smell is wrong, thicker, deeper. You bolt upright on your cot behind the saloon's back room, and you're already coughing before your boots hit the floor. The madam is ahead of you. She's already moving, already barking orders in that low, controlled voice that never quite rises, but somehow slices through every scream and crackle of flame. 2 to the west stair. Open the stable door. Get the ledger, not the coins. Go. You're 1 step behind her, stumbling out into the hallway where the walls are glowing with a sick orange flicker. Someone's crying. Someone's shouting. 1 girl is trying to carry a birdcage. Another is just holding a toothbrush. People don't make sense in emergencies, but the madam does. She doesn't freeze. She doesn't ask questions. She just moves. And that's the thing. This was always going to happen. Every madam knows it. Whether it's a rival lighting a match, a drunk client kicking over a lamp, or just bad luck in a dry season, fire is part of the job. Mainstream fact, saloon fires were absurdly common in frontier towns. Buildings were made of dry wood, lit with oil lamps, and packed with flammable everything: curtains, hair products, dresses, alcohol. Entire towns burned down in under an hour, some multiple times. Fringe tidbit? 1 madam in Montana supposedly kept a burn bag under her bed with gold teeth, bail money, and a marriage certificate she never used. When her building caught fire, she escaped barefoot, but clutching that bag. The next week, she opened a bakery across town. No one asked questions. Historians still argue whether most fires were accidents or arson. Plenty were both. Tonight, doesn't matter. You're hauling buckets now, hands blistered, lungs raw. The whole east side of the building is gone. Girls are coughing on the porch, dresses half singed, faces streaked with soot. The madam is pacing, counting them. Not panicking, just counting. 1 is missing. She dives back inside. You follow. It's hotter than any furnace you've ever known. The wallpaper curls like old parchment. A ceiling beam groans above you, like it's deciding whether or not to crush you both. The missing girl is in her room, trying to stuff something into a bag. Money, a locket, you can't tell. She's frozen, half choking. The madam grabs her by the arm, hard, and yells, "Leave it!" And she does. You all bolt. Out the back, through the smoke. Into the cool night air where the fire is less a threat and more a spectacle. The saloon is dying. And the madam? She doesn't scream. She just watches. The crowd gathers, because of course it does. Townspeople, drunks, opportunists. Some try to help. Some don't. One man casually asks if she plans to rebuild. She doesn't look at him. Just mutters, "Depends what survives." By dawn, it's over. The saloon is half charred bones and soaked ash. A whiskey barrel exploded in the kitchen and took out most of the roof. The piano is melted into something grotesque and tragic. You stand there, stunned. But the madam is already moving. She directs the girls to gather what's left. Clothes, furniture, salvageable silver. She orders breakfast from the cafe across the street and has it delivered in paper-wrapped bundles like it's just another morning. The girls eat in silence, huddled on crates and overturned benches. And then, with the sun barely over the rooftops, she walks into what's left of her office. There's a tin box under the floorboards. You didn't know it was there. She did. Inside, a spare ledger, rolled bills, several letters, and, because of course, one very old, very sharp knife. You sit with her while she flips through the pages, smoke-stained but intact. "I had two options," she says, voice hoarse. "Build again or disappear." You wait. She grins. "I'm building again?" And just like that, she starts writing names. Suppliers, cleaners, builders. You see her scribble, "Check lumber prices," and "new drapes, but uglier this time. Too nice attracts inspectors." She already has the plan. Because this isn't her first fire, one of the girls asks, hesitantly, "Can I still work?" The madam doesn't look up. "Only if you bring coffee." Later, you find her outside, staring at the remains of the saloon. A few beams still stand like scorched ribs. The wind stirs ash across the ground. She lights a cigarette off the smoldering wreckage, because of course she does, and exhales slowly. "No one died," she says. You nod. No sheriff knocking, no preacher gloating. Another nod. She smiles. Then, we're already ahead. By evening, she's booked 3 rooms in a boarding house, struck a deal with the bartender from the rival saloon, begrudgingly, and started sketching layouts for a new building. It won't be bigger, but it will be better. Because that's the real trick. Madams don't cry over flames. They use them. Burn it down? Fine. She'll rebuild it stronger, with a second chimney and 3 exits. The boarding house is cramped. The wallpaper peels like sunburn, and the landlady is 3 parts nosy to 1 part suspicious. But the madam makes it work. Of course she does. Within a day, she's turned 2 of the rooms into temporary workspaces, one for ledger repair and dress mending, and the other for interviewing new girls. Because yes, she's hiring again already. You're still brushing soot out of your coat when she glances up from her notebook and says, "Ever seen a girl become a madam right in front of your eyes?" You shake your head. She jerks her chin toward the back room. "Go meet Lottie." And so you do. Lottie isn't what you expect. No flashy dress, no booming laugh, no storm cloud of perfume. She's quiet, dark-haired, maybe 22, perched on a stool repairing a hem with the focus of someone defusing a bomb. She glances up, meets your eyes, and goes right back to stitching. "Don't bother me unless it's on fire," she says. You like her already? Turns out, Lottie used to be one of the madam's top girls, clever, calm, and surprisingly fluent in Spanish, which came in handy more often than you'd think. But she's been different lately. Less flirt, more clipboard. Less dancing, more accounting. And now, with the fire still smoldering in memory, the madam's giving her more responsibility. Not by handing her a title. No, by giving her a key. It's small, brass, and attached to a ribbon. It opens the drawer where the real money is kept, and it might as well be a crown. Mainstream fact: many madams started out as working girls. The transition wasn't sudden, it happened in layers. First, you're trusted with the lockbox. Then you're watching the floor. Then one day, the madam's out of town, and you're the one settling a bar fight with 3 words and a glare. Fringe tidbit: one woman in Deadwood ran an entire parlor for 2 years under her madam's name, because the real one had fled to California after a bad poker debt. She kept it running, paid off her own arrest warrant, and then reopened under her own name, with the same girls. Historians still argue whether these power transfers were planned or just survival. Was it mentorship or desperation? Did the madams choose their successors, or were they simply replaced when they broke down? You ask Lottie if she ever imagined being a madam. No, she says flatly. But I imagine worse. You glance at her notes. She's drafting a hiring schedule, calculating fabric costs, and rewriting an ad for help wanted, witty girls needed, good teeth preferred. Progress. The madam steps into the room and reads over Lottie's shoulder. She doesn't correct anything, just rests a hand lightly on her shoulder and says, "Don't forget to lie about the wages, first rule." Then she leaves. Lottie doesn't smile, but her stitching gets faster. Later that day, you sit with the madam in a borrowed parlor, watching her cut out newspaper clippings for inspiration. She's got this way of using scissors like a scalpel, measured, clean, deadly if needed. You ask her how she knows when a girl's ready to take over. She shrugs. Same way you know if bread's baked, you poke it. And Lottie, she's been poked, she's risen, and she didn't collapse when the heat came. You start to notice more. Girls asking her for help, her voice drifting over the others at mealtimes, her instructions written in the margins of the ledger, and the madam stepping back just a little, watching, testing. One night, a man comes knocking, drunk and loud, demanding to see the redhead who owes him a bottle. Lottie opens the door, doesn't even flinch, just tells him to sit down, hands him a cup of water, and calmly explains that if he speaks louder than a mouse again, she'll show him how they deal with loud mice around here. He leaves. Fast, you catch the madam in the hall, leaning on the banister with a glass of something dark and deserved. "She's got it," she says. And for a second, there's a softness behind her eyes. Relief, maybe, or pride, or both, because no madam lasts forever. And this life, it takes pieces from you. Sleep, patience, illusions. And sooner or later, you have to pass the keys. If you're lucky, you pass them before someone else pries them from your hand. So the madam prepares, not just for rebuilding, but for letting go. And Lottie? She doesn't call herself anything new yet, doesn't ask for respect. She earns it, day by day, floorboard by floorboard. That night, when the girls laugh a little louder and the whiskey flows a little easier, you realize this isn't a holding pattern. This is a shift. And the madam? She watches from her corner seat, lets someone else manage the numbers, and, for the first time since the fire, smiles like someone who might actually sleep tonight. A week passes, maybe more. Time stretches out in these dusty towns like a gambler's final promise, always longer than it should be, always one sigh away from falling apart. But not here, not under this roof. The new saloon isn't finished yet, but it's already a presence. Half-built timber bones, barrels waiting to be rolled inside, and fabric samples laid across the windowsill like hopeful flags. Lottie oversees it now. Well, mostly. The madam still walks the perimeter each morning, boots crunching gravel, measuring everything with her eyes. You stand beside her one morning, watching the carpenters hammer in rhythm. The sound is oddly comforting, like the town's heartbeat is slowly returning. The madam doesn't say much, just flicks a fly off her shoulder and murmurs, "No stage this time. Too many people fell off." And just like that, she strolls away, leaving you with a grin you can't quite explain. But even as the new saloon rises, something else hovers over you. Stories. Not the ones you've seen. The ones people tell about her. It starts in the general store. A young clerk leans in and whispers, "She once shot a man for using the wrong fork," which is almost certainly false, but you smile anyway. At the barber shop, someone swears she turned down a marriage proposal from a railroad tycoon, said something about preferring steam to hot air. More likely. Mainstream fact? Many Wild West madams became local legends during their lives. Newspapers wrote about them, tourists sought them out, and some even appeared in early photographs, posed in respectable dresses, framed beside ferns and rugs and other lies. Fringe tidbit? A few madams wrote fake autobiographies. One woman claimed she was a runaway duchess. Another insisted she'd survived a shipwreck and washed ashore in a corset, then seduced her way to a business license. None of it verifiable. All of it believable enough. Historians still argue which stories are true and which were marketing. But in a world where reputation was currency, who's going to question a woman who controls the only working piano in town? You hear the stories grow. She once tamed a mountain lion with a hairbrush. She turned the preacher's son into a choir boy and a cook. Because it's working. Clients drift in from nearby towns just to see the place that didn't burn all the way down. Businessmen send letters asking to host poker tournaments. Even the preacher, yes, that preacher, has stopped glaring quite so hard when she walks by. And the madam? She lets it happen. She doesn't correct the stories. She feeds them. One night, you find her adding clippings to a leather scrapbook, some hers, some not. She cuts slowly, pastes precisely. You peer over her shoulder and read a headline, "Notorious Madam Hosts Town's First Christmas Ball." You glance at her. She shrugs. Was mostly soup and dancing, but Christmas ball sounds better in print. The scrapbook is full of these moments, both fact and fable, a curated version of her life. Because here's the real secret. Madams didn't just survive the West, they shaped how it would be remembered. And in that scrapbook, you see the layers, headlines beside recipes, invoices beside poetry. One page even features a pressed flower labeled, "From a funeral we laughed at. He deserved it." Later, you ask her if she's ever told the real story of her life. She lights a match, considers it, then says, "Which one?" You laugh. She doesn't, because to her, there isn't a single truth. There's only what keeps you alive, what keeps the doors open, what keeps the ledger in the black, and legends. Legends are just insurance you don't have to cash in yet. Outside, the carpenters finish the last plank on the porch. Lottie checks the alignment with a string and declares it good enough to dance on. Someone starts humming. Someone else starts making drinks. And the smell of fresh pine mixes with leftover smoke in the air. You take it all in. The building, the people, the madam. And you realize, this isn't just a story about business or survival. It's about ownership of your past, your name, your scars, and yes, even your myths. She turns to you and says, They'll say I once ran a house made of gold. You nod, and you'll let them. She grins. I might even let them find some. Because sometimes, the best part of being a legend is knowing you wrote it yourself. The day of the grand reopening arrives with a dust storm on the horizon and a chicken loose in the street, which, according to the madam, is good luck. You're not sure about the chicken, but everything else feels charged. Even the air hums like something important's about to happen. The new saloon is smaller, leaner, built like it means it. Dark wood, deep red curtains, no stage this time, but a raised platform near the bar for the piano, now freshly tuned, and hopefully less prone to collapse. The front windows are etched with floral designs, just subtle enough to look fancy, but not so bold that a preacher can complain. By sundown, it's packed. The crowd's bigger than expected. Locals, travelers, at least one outlaw pretending to be a dentist, and a man who swears he once played banjo for a governor's wife. The girls are radiant. Lottie stands behind the bar, no longer a girl at all, but not quite a madam either. Yet. She watches everything, counts every coin, and smiles without showing all her teeth. And the madam? She stands just inside the door, wearing a black dress with a green ribbon and eyes that miss nothing. She's not hosting tonight. She's watching. You stay near her at first, nervous she might need something, or that someone might try something. But all she says is, "Look." And you do. You see girls laughing, not performing. You see the bartender crack a joke that makes the piano player nearly fall off his stool. You see the local sheriff, off duty, sipping something suspiciously not tea with a grin that says he'll deny it later. And you realize, she's done it again. Mainstream fact. Some madams manage to run the same house through multiple burnings, arrests, marriages, and pandemics. One in San Francisco even lived long enough to see her parlor turned into a charity home, under her own name. Fringe tidbit? There's a rumor that one madam left her entire fortune to her cats, and her house stayed open, run by the cat's legal guardian, for 3 more years. Historians still argue whether the longevity of these women's businesses was due to economic necessity or pure unkillable spirit. Watching the madam now? You know the answer. It's both. Later that night, you find her alone at the edge of the dance floor. She doesn't dance. Never has, she tells you. But she likes to watch other people dance. Says it's the only time folks don't lie. You ask if she's proud. She pretends not to hear. Then, check the floorboards under the piano. You do. There's a tin box. Inside, the original ledger, 1 dried rose, 3 coins from the old place, and a folded piece of paper with 1 word on it. Again. She lets you hold it. Not to keep. Just to understand. Because that's the rhythm of her life. Burn. Build. Teach. Leave a trace. Then, again. The girls are dancing now. One pulls Lottie out from behind the bar, and she doesn't even argue. The music swells. Laughter spills like champagne across the wood. The madam steps outside. You follow. The air is cool. The street is emptying. Somewhere down the block, someone's snoring against a post. She leans against a beam and says, "This is the last one." You nod. You know what she means. Not because she's tired, but because she knows when something is done. She's taught the next. She's laid the foundation. And she's kept a copy of the blueprint, just in case. What now, you ask? She shrugs. Might go inland. Heard there's a town with a broken piano and a broken mayor. She smiles. Just barely. Sounds like home. You both stand there in silence, the saloon glowing behind you, voices rising like firelight. And that's when it hits you. This isn't just the end of a story. It's a beginning. Again. The night quiets, slowly, gently. The piano fades, one note at a time, until the last one lingers longer than it should. The laughter softens too, melting into whispers, into private jokes, into yawns muffled behind gloved hands. Chairs scrape softly against the floor. Boots thud with less urgency. The madam has vanished into her office, not gone, just retreating, like a tide that always returns. Outside, the wind has settled. The sky is cloudless. The stars blink lazily, like they're dozing off between their own legends. You step onto the porch and sit on the rail, letting the wood hold your weight and the cool air press gently against your cheeks. You think of her, boots on floorboards, a ledger in one hand, a glass in the other, never quite letting the world get ahead of her. You think of the girls, the whispered codes, the hidden safes, the firelight, the rope ladder, the pressed flowers, and the poems no one ever read out loud. You think of every woman who carved something out of the dust with her bare hands and dared to call it hers. And you breathe, slow, deep. The story isn't loud anymore. It's not shouting, it's resting. And maybe you are too. The last candle flickers, the stars stay, the wind stirs just enough to whisper, you made it, you're safe. And the madam is still standing, somewhere, waiting for the next saloon to rise,